Former President Jacob Zuma has informed the acting registrar of the Constitutional Court that he will not be appearing before the State Capture Commission. Analysts have seen this as a defiance of the ANC's instruction to all its members to cooperate with the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture if summoned to appear before it. Well, the Constitutional Court had given Zuma until 3:30 p.m. on Tuesday to file his answering affidavit, but he's failed to do so. Well, let's discuss the implications of the latest episode in the standoff now. And I'm joined by political analyst, Professor Sipho Siepe. He joins us from Kempton Park this afternoon. Prof, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you for making time to speak to us. We did try to find a partner, if you like, another analyst that we could throw these ideas with. Unfortunately, many people on holiday, but nonetheless, thank you for making yourself available. Let's press ahead then, Prof. I want to start with this whole framing by some analysts who are saying that this is Zuma defying the ANC, NEC plea to members, particularly those implicated in allegations of state capture, to cooperate with the commission. Is that how you see it as well? Defiance by the former president?
No, not really defiance. Remember, when you appear in a court of law, your rights as a citizen do not get expunged because a party has said so. Everybody has to make sure that they protect their rights as citizens. The party has a role to play. But in this case, you also have a scenario that has unfolded. Mr. Zuma has made a case before the commission in which he felt that he would not get a fair hearing. And there was a submission by his lawyer to ask for the recusal of the chair. So it is not like he had chosen not to do so. And when you listen to the arguments that were presented of recusal, it was the manner in which the commission was conducting itself, and also the comments that were made by the chair. So all these things, as the advocate Skakani was pointing out, that for a reasonable person, there'll be a sense of apprehension that they will not get a fair hearing. And this is the issue that Jacob Zuma had actually raised. But what we also saw was a situation where the judge himself and Jacob Zuma, who is presented more as an accused, they were even contesting about the facts. The judge is supposed to be uninvolved with the case because you cannot be a chair and be a player at the same time. And it is for that reason that the advocate Kakan felt that it would also be necessary to report the chair to the Judicial Service Commission, because it is unacceptable for a judge to be quarreling with a person before him or her about issues of facts. Where in cases where there's been most recusal, it is where there's been a sense of bias. And even in this case, Skakani was able to point out that there were comments that were coming from the judge, which may not have been intentional, but which he said a reasonable person who appears there can actually say this judge has already made up his mind. And he was appealing to Zondo that first, because of those comments and because of the conduct, and also most importantly, he says, when you talk about a commission is supposed to be a truth-seeking forum. And the manner in which Zondo has almost commanded this commission has given a sense that there was a parading of certain witnesses. The choice of witnesses was almost giving an impression to one particular narrative. And this is why Sikakani was saying your own conduct was problematic. And in his submission, and the submission also of another advocate, Ngalwana, who has now gone to the Constitutional Court to say he wants to make sure that other people are not shielded from being questioned. So you could actually see that it is not only Skakani who's raising concerns about what appears to be the bias, where some people are vilified and some people are actually praised. And it is this parading of witnesses but also the comments that come from the chair
Yeah.
that had raised a certain degree of apprehension.
All right, Prof, you've delved very clearly into the recent past of what has happened and what perhaps would have led to the former president walking out. However, it is important to remind the public that when you speak about the chairperson of the commission being both the player and the referee, it does appear that the rules do allow him in as far as commissions are concerned. And so that's why he could respond and give an outcome as to whether or not the request by the former president for him to recuse himself, this is Zondo, well, those did not succeed. As far as bias is concerned, again, the commission chairperson weighed into that and found that...
Let me point out to you that this is not the first time that the commissions are reviewed successfully, where judges had actually refused to step aside. It is not unusual for recusers also on appeal to be won. This is the challenge that Skakani was actually putting, that it becomes very difficult when you are being asked to say, can you appeal to yourselves to say there might be a bias? And some judges refuse. But it does not mean that just because you've refused, you are actually correct. Because you are now judging yourself that I'm above this. And this is a most difficult thing to ask of a judge. But you cannot presume on the basis that he had said no, that he is actually correct. This is why Skakani, in his wisdom, has decided that this matter must now be taken to court, so that these issues that he was raising there, that the Deputy Chief Justice chose not to hear or was not convinced, another court could come with a different outcome.
Prof, let's talk about the former president, Jacob Zuma, and his conduct towards this commission. You've laid the history, as I've said. I want to talk about how we, ordinary South Africans, should interpret the actions of the former president. What should we be taking away from how he is conducting himself in a commission that he himself helped set up, albeit with pressure on him?
Yeah, first of all, you're quite correct that he didn't actually set it up. It was set up by through the judicial office of the Chief Justice, because he was also not even allowed as the president to appoint the person who's going to chair, precisely because the argument that was raised was the issue of impartiality. So that is the history. But what was also important for Jacob Zuma, and which he had actually put very clearly, is that I'm willing to appear, but also in my appearance, I want to be treated fairly. And this is why Skakani made that submission. And to us who are also looking, we can actually listen to what Skakani had actually presented and say, has he made a case? Remember, Skakani is not appearing here as a person who does not know the law. People like Ngalana SC, who is also an acting judge, who has actually raised the same issues. So it is not only Jacob Zuma raises that, there are quite a number of people who have actually raised that the manner in which the commission has conducted itself raises a number of issues. Remember also, the issue that Ngalana also raises is that there's been more pontification, rumor mongering by the witnesses that have actually come. And it says if you have a proper commission of inquiry, you make sure that people who appear there are not people who come there with an axe to grind. Because when you do that, it is no longer truth-seeking. It's about finding a scapegoat. So there are questions that are legitimate that are actually being raised. So what we should allow is also a situation where when people appeal to the laws and to the courts, we have established those so that the people can feel that the system that has been set treats them fairly. There is nothing illegal in questioning a forum where you are supposed to appear. And no court has actually suggested that what the courts can say your questioning has no merit. But we have rights to question the forum in which some people have to sit in adjudicating whether we are right or wrong. But what is most important is that it is not a case of a person being guilty. It's a forum where we want to have an understanding of what happened. And when that happens, it cannot be also finding a scapegoat. This is why the Constitution is very clear that members of cabinet are individually and collectively accountable. And this is the point that Ngalana is raising, that this is why the current president must also come to account that what is it that he was doing during his tenure as a deputy president.
Well, Prof, after the break, I want to explore exactly that with you, whether or not the president is running away from answering those very key questions by putting up all this fight that he says is bias against him, and that the commission chairperson has an axe to grind. I wonder whether that indeed is how we should be seeing it, but we'll explore this in a moment. You're watching Newsfeed, the weekend edition. Very good afternoon to you. If you're just joining us, we're still talking about the former president, Jacob Zuma's decision to refuse to attend the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo's state capture inquiry. And we are in conversation with Professor Sipho Siepe. Prof, thank you very much for staying with us. The Secretary of the Commission says that the conduct of the former president, Jacob Zuma, that of leaving the inquiry on the 19th of November without the express permission of the chairperson, was not only unlawful, but it breached the Commission's Act. Now, we are all equal before the law, Professor, as politicians and legal experts will tell us all the time. But here's a question. What does this say? What I've just said to you was said by the Secretary of the Commission. What does it say about the former president's adherence to the rule of law, and in particular, the oath he took as president at the time when he pledged to uphold the Constitution?
Well, first of all, there could be a debate around it, and I think it's one of those instances where I thought could have been handled much more, I would say, soberly, without there being an appearance of what you call disregard of the chair. But what was on the table was a request for the chair to recuse himself. So when you're faced with that, you can't then have a request presented to you and pretend that you can continue as it is. What I would have expected is that both the advocate representing Mr. Zuma and Mr. Zuma would have conferred, or the chair could have asked for a moment to say, given this bombshell that you actually presented to me about having to recuse myself, could we find a way of handling it? But if one were to be also honest, remember there were two prayers that were presented, or suggestions of remedial action. One was that they would continue not to ask for his recusal. One was a recusal. Secondly was the chair had to provide an environment where the forum is not turned into a trial, where he can actually present his side of the story, and where the judge or the chair could also accept that there may have been a bias. because what was most important is the forum must be such that whoever appears there does not appear to be intimidated or have an apprehension of the possibility of bias, or where they feel that this is actually a political ambush. And the advocates went at great lengths. But I do accept that I would have expected that that process, that moment, could have been handled differently. But what was seen there was something that suggested almost a defiance of sorts.
I've got to press you on this one, Prof, because you keep referring to it. In your own understanding, where would you say bias resulted of what was understood to be argued by the former president? Were there clear examples of bias?
Yeah. First of all, when you talk about state capture, you're talking about a number of people who were involved within the state during that period. And like I told you, that when you talk about members of cabinet being individually and collectively accountable, and if you talk about the destruction of the state-owned enterprises, then you go deeper to say who was responsible, who was given the responsibility of making sure that you turn them around. Then you'll find that there were particular individuals who were given that responsibility. In this case, you have the deputy president of the time, the current president, Ramaphosa.
All right,
then
Prof,
ask,
let me interject there quickly. You're quite right that collectively there was an executive, and yes, it's led by a head who was former President Jacob Zuma at the time. But at whose door then do you lay the blame for those who clearly had information given to them about a cabinet reshuffle, that was to take place? And we have just listened actually to a repeat of that on this station by the lady who worked for companies that were associated to the Guptas, to say a month ahead of this happening, they were actually alerted to it. So at whose door do you lay that blame? Because we know that the responsibility to reshuffle cabinet lies with who?
No, first of all, if you're a member of cabinet, we must talk about what the Constitution says. The Constitution, which is the supreme law, says when decisions are taken at cabinet level and you are a member, you are also accountable. So let us not talk about what people say. Let's talk about the Constitution, which is very clear cut.
Prof.
Then the second.
Prof. Prof.
Can I finish this point?
Okay.
The second is the issue that is not only Jacob Zuma who's raising the issue. Ngalana has written already to the Constitutional Court to say it cannot be that you have an individual and certain individuals and others are shielded. So it was a responsibility of, according to Ngalana's affidavit, the responsibility of the chair to make sure that you bring all the people who have a case and might have a case to answer. You cannot be selective if you are seeking the truth. But if you are interested in finding a scapegoat, then the whole commission becomes a charade.
But Professor, okay, all right, I get you. And in fairness, there is a person who I think many references were made to say he was receiving special treatment. At some point, the commission chairperson was reluctant for him to be cross-examined. But ultimately, Pravin Gordhan was brought to be cross-examined by the advocate representing the former SARS commissioner, Mr. Moyane. So there is a clear example of someone that was questioned. We saw Des van Rooyen, the minister who was the finance minister for 4 days. He was there and he had to answer questions. Why is the difficulty on the part of the former president to go there and answer questions as opposed to wanting to be given a platform where he is going to talk about conspiracies, about people who have followed him for the longest time and who have always sought to scupper his political career?
Well, Toli, it will appear that you either choose not to listen to Skakane's points and you chose not to read what Ngalana had actually said. He says, when you talk about a truth-seeking forum, what do? You align your witnesses not to be almost wedded to a particular narrative. And because when you do that, then you undermine the whole notion of truth.
Yeah.
Truth is much more complex than one-sidedness. When you look at the list of witnesses that were called in by the commission, you could see all of them who had a political axe to grind, starting with Faith Mento. It was people like yourselves who were talking about bombshells. And I disagree that these are not options. These are simple statements. You had Temba Masekos, you had all this, and all of them, after cross-examination, we now find the point that Mcebisi Jonas, who say the problem with us is that we have made this commission to be all about Zuma. And he says, let's not Zumaize it. Let us find the truth, and so that we can come up with policy recommendations on how to prevent. But if we narrow it to one person, but the point that you're also raising is that, yes, President Zuma, if he is called upon, he has to appear, but he also has a right as a citizen. I can't speak for him. If I see there's a forum that appears to be biased against me, and within this political toxic environment, I have a right to exercise my rights and advised by lawyers. He is not advised by Jimmy Cameron lately in law. He's advised by a very senior counsel. And that counsel's views are supported by another senior counsel who is an acting judge. So we cannot just dismiss just because we may not like the outcome and the position of people. People have a right to say, I'm going to exercise my rights. Nobody has actually said Jacob Zuma has acted illegally in terms of seeking a recourse to the courts, because that's what it's all about, that we have a right to seek recourse. And the courts will decide whether our seeking recourse is frivolous or not. But I can't speak for him. But yes, we would like to have him to speak, but not only him, but all the people who were in that cabinet who are accused or are said to have been responsible or were simply enjoying time there while there was what you call 9 wasted years.
Prof, a simple question to you that still stands. When you are told before the commission that certain individuals who ran companies that were run by the friends of the former president, as he himself admittedly called the Guptas, when you come across information that says they knew ahead of time that a cabinet reshuffle was going to be implemented, who would they possibly have gotten that information from?
Obviously, there is a clear indication that there were discussions with people who influenced or were influencing the president. And that is something that is still an allegation that needs to be tested. The fact that it has been repeated many times does not make it true. But I am not saying it is not true. All I'm simply saying is this is an issue that needs to be tested. And it will be tested when you create an environment where those who are going to speak are going to be able to say this is the truth. Remember, whether Jacob Zuma testifies or not, Zondo Commission can make up its mind based on the testimonies that is before it. Forcing somebody to speak is not going to change whatever evidence has been presented before Zondo Commission. It's a case of even somebody who appears in court. People can actually go to court and say, I refuse to answer the question because it might implicate me. There's not much you can do about it because it is their right. So, and this that Kakane was also raising. The long and short of it is that the Zondo Commission has enough in its hand to be able to make a decision if it is satisfied that it does not need to call other people. But as there are already interventions by other people who say, if we're going to talk about the truth, let it not be part of the truth, but let there be the whole truth. And other people who were in senior positions when these decisions were made should also come and account.
Prof, I've less than a minute to end this conversation between yourself and me. And my final question to you is whether the former president's game plan is to test whether there is a possibility of instability should he be thrown in jail for refusing to appear before that commission. And I say this on the back of what Kebbi Mapatswe's MK MVA have said, which is to threaten violence if and when Jacob Zuma is arrested?
Well, I don't know about Jacob Zuma's game plan. I'm not his advisor. I think what I know and what I've seen happen is what you are aware of, that he is a person who's saying, these are my rights. And I see a forum that I think is there to ambush me. And I see a forum where the chair's conduct is questionable. I see a forum where the chair's comments are problematic. And I see a forum where there's only one side and there are other people who should be brought in. And in that, he is not alone. There are senior counsels who are saying, we also want to make sure that the truth and the whole truth is actually put before this country so that we can move forward as a nation.
Professor Sipho Siepe, thank you very much for your time, and interesting debate between yourself and I is what I would call it. Thanks very much for being available to talk to us, Professor Sipho Siepe there from Kempton Park.